people don't even speak their native language with their children anymore. I guess they're trying to make these children competitive with the West, so they only speak English. And the problem is that this English is it's not fluent. Like if you go to anywhere, travel outside of here, everybody will say you have an accent, and the first question they will ask you is, "Where are you from?" You know, there are people that raise their children here who don't even know the past presidents of Ghana, because they've raised them to survive in the West, and they don't know anything. They don't know the language. They don't know the culture. They don't know the presidents. And I don't think that Ghana is an isolated place, you know? And so, I'm I'm doing this so that people can understand that education is not education if the person you're educating doesn't know who they are.
Get your hands up, stand up. Detroit, New York, stand up. LA, Atlanta, stand up. Nigeria, Ghana, stand up. South Africa, Haiti, stand up. Jamaica, Trinidad, stand up. United we stand, divided we fall.
Education is not education if the person you're educating doesn't know who they are.
I'm glad you said that, because we've got to learn the difference between two words: education and indoctrination. We have been indoctrinated, but we think it's education. Indoctrination, right? Doctrine means I have some principles, I have some information. In means I'm going to put it in you. And then my test to see if it worked is I'm going to ask you to give back to me what I said. You repeat to me what I've said, right? I've kind of made you a robot. You're going to repeat whatever I say. That's indoctrination. You're not learning anything. You're memorizing a script, just like an actor or an actress. You're memorizing that script. Education comes from the Latin word edurare, which means to draw out. And it refers to a well, right? You draw water out of a well. So that's edurare. Now think about it. Where did the water come from? The water was already there. The water was a natural thing. So all you're doing when you're engaged in education is pulling out of the student the God-given, ancestral-given, spiritual knowledge that they already had. And then education is enabling them to use that for their success, for the success of their community, whatever. If education doesn't allow you to raise your own self, to raise your community, then it's not really education. Quite often it's indoctrination. And I think, we've really got to get a handle on that. I want to mention a book called What They Didn't Teach Me in History Class. And it's a book by Indus Kush. Indus is Indus, Kush is Kush. What I like about that book is that it's not really a giant history book with thousands of pages, because our history is so extensive. But it's kind of a page of, did you know this? Did you know this? Did you know this? I have yet to see anybody get beyond 4 or 5 pages and have something that they were told or taught be just completely destroyed. Now, that can be an unnerving experience, right? Because we've clung to those things. But it is important that you get unhooked from that knowledge, because then you're left with the question, well, what is true? But that begins the search to find yourself. Africans are on a search to find themselves, because their collective selves were taken away from them. They had to be converted into slaves and imitators and emulators. Kwame Ture, who was known as Stokely Carmichael, said, we have become those things most unlike ourselves. And if you want an African to get mad at you quite often, from any part of the diaspora at home, start trying to plug them into themselves. and just we have this reflex in which we're going to try to get something. You mentioned language as an example. Language is not just communication, the ability of you and me to talk to each other or write. Language is thought formation. Think about that for a second. Before I speak to you, I've thought about it. And as I thought it in a language, right? So if I control your language and I control the words you use, I control what's possible in your thoughts. I used to ask my students, I said, okay, there are about 2,000 plus Hindi words that refer to the spirit and parts of the spirit and aspects of the spirit. So you can, in that language, talk all about the spirit, dimensions of the spirit part. Okay, what have you got in English? And, my students would come up with ghost, spirit, soul, apparition, 3 or 4 things, and that's it. So now, if I want to talk about the richness of African spirituality, I'm not going to be able to do that in English. And the goal is that I can't do that at all. Because if I can't think about it, I can't put energy towards it. And if I can't put energy towards it, then I can't move it forward into the world. It dies. So a dead language is not just a dead language. It's the death of an entire history and a way of thinking. I mean, even knowing the words for your ancestors, right? We're going to honor our ancestors and those who went before. How can you venerate them if you don't know even the language or the words to address them?
Hmm.
Because the word ancestor is not out.
Hmm.
But and how many programs of the educational systems we have, especially at the highest level, train you to speak traditional African languages at home or abroad. You'll see the push is to get you to become imitators of civilization rather than purveyors of civilization. I don't need anyone else's. I have mine. I have lots of spiritual systems. I don't have to take someone else's. I have lots of language. There are countries in Africa that have, 10 languages and 100 dialects. I'm not a language pauper. I'm not broke. Africa has more of the world's resources than any other continent. I'm not landless. It's one of the
Hmm.
largest land masses. It's about 3 times the size of the United States. I'm not, but if I don't know who I am,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter that I potentially have or potentially connect to these things. Imagine yourself being unbelievably rich, unbelievably powerful,
Hmm.
and then you lose your mind.
Hmm.
What happens? Someone else comes in and they're gonna live in your house and they're gonna take your money and they're gonna take your possessions and they're gonna do that generation after generation until you come out of the coma and you wake up and you say, wait a minute, this is mine. This
Hmm.
is this is my land, which my ancestors were part of. I'm connected to my land. These are my ancestors. These are my spiritual systems. I'm going to connect. These are my clothes. Burkina Faso just passed a rule that school kids would wear traditional African dress.
Hmm.
The fact that you needed a change in the law to do that. Another country says they're going to start using their traditional language. You needed a law for that?
Yeah.
You never needed a law in France to get the French to speak French. You never needed a law in Britain to get the British to speak British English. But we actually have to make laws to get ourselves to be ourselves. And I think that's what we have to overcome. And we do it person by person, block by block, community by community, and most importantly, we need to put our resources into our own stuff. Sometimes we say we're committed to this, but we put our resources in other people's stuff. We talk about African development. Are you really putting your money towards African people controlling their own economics and resources, or are you putting money towards Western stuff that is located in Africa or housed in Africa, but ultimately is not doing that? And I think there are some African states now, I'm happy to say, that seem to have finally awakened, and
Hmm.
and they're beginning to say, you know what, we don't have to give away our stuff, and
Hmm.
we don't have to allow anyone to come and just take whatever it is. We actually It's been so many years I've been watching and praying for that day, and I think I'm starting to see it. And your television, your internet, however it is you reach out to local communities, it's a little piece of that. I think the ancestors, the creator, are calling us towards a resurrection. So I want to say something optimistic, because this can be a very pessimistic story. But I believe person by person, individual, and certainly we won't get everybody at once, but I think there's beginning to be some awakening of African humanity that says, there's more to me, there's more to us than has ever been discovered. And I'm going to try to grab me a piece of it.
And it will only make the world richer. You know, diversity only will work to make the world a better place. Having African creativity, having African greatness, having resources that you don't just steal, but that you negotiate a fair price for. So you can use some if you need to. Like it works for everyone.
Absolutely.
But
Africans controlled Europe for over 800 years. This is part of that history that we don't get. I always tell people slavery and colonialism were an interruption to our history. They were a commercial. They were not the main program. And so
mm,
when you realize that we actually built a lot of the infrastructure that was in Europe, and the Europeans then taking that infrastructure later came back and confronted Africa with an image of Africa where they didn't have anything. It's like, wait a minute, you didn't have anything.
mm,
What you have was built. I mean, if you think about it, Christopher Columbus, where they always start history, Christopher Columbus came with the boats. Here's the thing. Why was he coming? He was an Italian coming from the Spanish paid for his trip. The House of Castile and the House of Aragon in Spain had united, and Spain was independent for the first time in hundreds of years, and they were celebrating by looking for this route for India. But who controlled Spain, Portugal, and France before that happened? Africans.
Mm.
And you see, so actually Columbus' voyage is their celebration that they're actually now beginning to exercise their own independence. And later on, they come to us and tell us that we never controlled anything, we never ran anything, we never did anything. Yes, we did. And we did. And I think the real fear on the other side, the fear is that the rise of African humanity, and you made an excellent point, it's for the betterment of everybody. But I think there's a fear on the part of certain powerful people who know better, that African humanity will mean African domination, that we will be a resentful, vengeful people. Their ignorance about us is why they think that, because we were never that, and that's not our culture and our traditions and other things, nor of any of the indigenous people. So I think they have nothing to fear, but I think they do fear that if they told the truth and they educated us about the truth, they would have to face the consequences of that truth, right? And their notion is that we will, in our rise back into civilization, do what they did. We won't, because we're of a different character. It's not in us.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Dr. Imani, once again, thank you so much for all the knowledge that you have poured out on us. I pray that this message reaches somebody, and that it changes their mindset, and they pass it on to their children and their children's children and their children's children. Like you said, all of us individually are working towards a collective action to bring up our people out of this inertia, so that we can continue on our path of greatness, what we were always meant to be.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Amen on that prayer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Please share, comment, and subscribe.